Steve Harvey had hosted Family Feud for 25 years, and in that time he had witnessed countless emotional reunions, surprising revelations, and heartwarming moments. But on a crisp autumn afternoon in October 2025, a 72-year-old decorated war hero named Colonel Jim Patterson would look into the audience and recognize someone he hadn't seen in 52 years, someone whose face he thought he'd never see again, triggering a reunion so unexpected and emotionally overwhelming that it would bring the entire studio to its feet and reduce everyone present to tears. What began as a standard family game show episode would transform into a moment of redemption, forgiveness, and the extraordinary power of fate bringing people back together after more than half a century apart. Before we continue with Jim's stunning recognition of someone from his past, if you're moved by these authentic stories about unexpected reunions, the healing power of forgiveness, and how the universe sometimes creates second chances we never thought we'd receive, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. These stories remind us that it's never too late to make peace with our past, and that some connections transcend time and distance. The Patterson family from Richmond, Virginia walked onto the Family Feud stage with pride radiating from every member. There were 5 of them competing. Colonel Jim Patterson, retired Air Force at 72, his wife Helen, who was 70, their daughter Rebecca, who was 45, their son-in-law Marcus, who was 47, and their granddaughter Emily, who was 22. Jim cut an impressive figure despite his age, standing ramrod straight with the bearing of someone who had spent decades in military service. He wore his Air Force dress uniform, the chest decorated with an impressive array of medals including a distinguished flying cross, a silver star, and a Purple Heart. His silver hair was cut in a precise military style, and his blue eyes held both warmth and the distant look of someone who had seen things most people never would. During the family introductions, Steve immediately noticed and acknowledged Jim's extensive military decorations. "Colonel Patterson, sir, that is quite an impressive display of medals you're wearing. Distinguished Flying Cross, Silver Star, Purple Heart. You are a genuine American hero. What was your service?" Jim's voice was strong and clear despite his age. "United States Air Force, Mr. Harvey. I served from 1971 to 2001, 30 years of service. I flew F-4 Phantoms in Vietnam, then various other aircraft throughout my career. I completed 147 combat missions." The audience erupted in applause, many people rising to their feet to honor this decorated veteran. Steve's expression showed deep respect. 147 combat missions. "Sir, thank you for your service. That is extraordinary. You must have some stories." Jim nodded, his expression becoming more somber. "I have many stories, Mr. Harvey. Some I can tell, some I can't, and some I've spent 50 years trying to forget but can't seem to." There was something in the way Jim said this, a weight in his voice that made Steve pause. But before he could follow up, Jim gestured to his family. "But I'm here today with the people who matter most to me. My beautiful wife Helen, who has put up with me for 48 years. My daughter Rebecca, who became a teacher like her mother. My son-in-law Marcus, who is one of the finest men I know. And my granddaughter Emily, who just graduated from college with honors. These are my victories, Mr. Harvey. These are what make all those combat missions worthwhile." The game proceeded with both families displaying good humor and competitive spirit. The Pattersons were playing against the Rodriguez family from Texas, and the energy was positive and lighthearted. But throughout the game, Steve noticed that Jim kept glancing toward the studio audience with an expression of what looked like confusion or recognition, as though he was trying to place someone or something that seemed familiar. During one particularly long answer from another contestant, Jim's gaze fixed on someone in the audience and he went completely still, his face draining of color. Steve, always attuned to his contestants, noticed immediately. "Colonel Patterson, sir, are you all right?" Jim didn't respond at first, his eyes locked on whoever he was looking at in the audience. His wife Helen touched his arm with concern. "Jim, honey, what's wrong?" Jim's voice, when he finally spoke, was barely a whisper, but the microphone picked it up. "It can't be. After all these years, it can't be him." The studio fell quiet, everyone sensing that something significant was happening. Steve followed Jim's gaze into the audience, trying to identify who the colonel was looking at. "Sir, do you recognize someone in our audience?" Jim nodded slowly, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion and disbelief. "Nguyen, in the 3rd row. That's Nguyen Van Thanh. I would recognize him anywhere, even after 52 years. That's the man who saved my life in Vietnam." The studio erupted in gasps and exclamations. Steve's eyes went wide as he tried to process what Jim had just revealed. In the 3rd row of the studio audience, An elderly Vietnamese man, probably in his early 70s, had gone completely pale and was staring at Jim with an expression of equal shock and disbelief. The man stood slowly, his hand over his heart, tears already streaming down his weathered face. Steve, recognizing that something extraordinary was unfolding, made an immediate decision. "Sir, would you please come down here? I think we need to understand what's happening." Security staff helped the elderly Vietnamese man make his way from the third row down to the stage. As he approached, Jim stepped away from his family position and moved toward the man, and the two elderly veterans stood facing each other for a long moment, both with tears flowing freely. Jim spoke first, his voice breaking. "Nguyen, is it really you? After all these years?" The Vietnamese man nodded, his own voice heavily accented but clear. "Yes, Colonel Patterson, it is me. I never thought I would see you again. I thought you had forgotten about me, about what happened." Jim's response was immediate and passionate. "Forgot? How could I forget? You saved my life. You risked everything to save me. I have thought about you every single day for 52 years. I tried to find you after the war, but I couldn't. I didn't know if you survived, if you made it out, if you—" He couldn't finish the sentence, too overcome with emotion. Steve Harvey, standing witness to this reunion, recognized that he needed to give these men space to explain what was happening while also helping the audience understand the significance of this moment. "Gentlemen, I think everyone here would like to understand your story. Colonel Patterson, can you tell us what happened 52 years ago?" Jim took a deep breath, composing himself slightly, and began to share a story he had told very few people in his life. March 1973. I was 20 years old, a new pilot flying F-4 Phantoms out of Da Nang Air Base. On March 14th, my aircraft was hit by ground fire during a bombing mission near the DMZ. I managed to eject, but my parachute took me deep into enemy territory, about 15 miles north of the demilitarized zone. I was injured in the ejection, my leg was broken, and I was alone in hostile territory with no immediate hope of rescue. The studio was completely silent, everyone riveted by Jim's account. He continued, "I managed to hide in heavy jungle for about 6 hours, but I knew it was only a matter of time before North Vietnamese forces found me. I was trying to radio for extraction, but I wasn't sure if anyone could get to me before the enemy did. That's when Nguyen found me." Jim turned to look at Nguyen, his expression full of gratitude and emotion. Nguyen was a North Vietnamese soldier. He was patrolling with his unit, searching for downed American pilots like me. By all rights, he should have captured me or killed me. That was his job, his duty. Instead, he made a choice that saved my life and could have cost him his own. Nguyen spoke up, his English heavily accented but understandable, his voice soft but carrying in the silent studio. "I found Colonel Patterson, though he was not colonel then, just young pilot, hiding in the jungle. He was hurt in pain, trying to be brave, but I could see he was very afraid. I was supposed to call my unit, supposed to bring him as prisoner. But when I looked at him, I did not see enemy. I saw a young man, same age as me, far from home, scared, hurt. I thought about my brother who had died 2 months before in American bombing. I thought about how my mother cried for my brother. And I thought, if this American boy dies, his mother will cry the same way." The audience was completely silent, many people openly crying at Nguyen's words. He continued, "So I made choice. I told my unit over radio that I found no American in my search area. I gave Colonel Patterson, Jim, some of my food, some water. I showed him on his map the safest route to move south, away from where my unit was searching. I told him to wait until dark, then move quickly. I told him American helicopters would come looking for survivors near the coast, that he should try to reach there. Then I left him, went back to my unit, lied to my commanding officer about what I found." Jim took up the story. "I followed Nguyen's directions exactly. I moved through the jungle for 2 days, broken leg and all, using a stick as a crutch. I finally made it to an area where an American rescue helicopter picked me up. I told my debriefing officers about the North Vietnamese soldier who let me go, but of course there was no way to find him, no way to thank him. I didn't even know his full name. He had only told me Nguyen, which I later learned is one of the most common surnames in Vietnam." Jim's voice grew more intense. "After I recovered and returned to service, I flew 96 more combat missions in Vietnam before the war ended. Every single mission I thought about Nguyen. Every time I dropped bombs, every time I fired weapons, I wondered if I might be killing the man who saved my life. The guilt of that, the moral complexity of continuing to fight after an enemy soldier showed me such mercy and humanity, it haunted me. It still haunts me." He turned to face Nguyen directly. "When the war ended, I tried to find you. I contacted veteran organizations, refugee assistance programs, anyone who might help me locate a North Vietnamese soldier named Nguyen who had served near the DMZ in 1973. But there were hundreds of thousands of soldiers named Nguyen, and I had no other identifying information. I eventually gave up, assuming I would never see you again, never get to say thank you, never get to tell you that your choice to show mercy to an enemy changed my entire life. Nguyen, tears flowing freely now, responded, "After war ended, my life became very difficult. Many North Vietnamese soldiers who showed mercy to Americans were punished when superiors found out. I was investigated several times because someone reported that I might have helped American pilot escape. I was never formally punished because there was no proof, but I was watched carefully. My career in military was finished. Later in 1985, I came to United States as refugee with my wife and children. I built new life here, became American citizen, tried to forget about the war. But I never forgot about the young American pilot I helped. I wondered if he survived, if he made it home, if he lived good life. I prayed many times that he did." Steve Harvey, openly weeping, recognized the profound significance of what was unfolding. "So let me understand this. 52 years ago, Nguyen, you were a North Vietnamese soldier who found a downed American pilot, Jim, and instead of capturing or killing him, you helped him escape, even though doing so put you at risk. Jim, you survived because of Nguyen's mercy, and you've been trying to find him for 5 decades to thank him. And today, completely by chance, Nguyen happens to be in our studio audience when you're a contestant, and you recognize each other after more than half a century." Both men nodded, and the audience erupted in applause and cheers, people on their feet celebrating this miraculous reunion. Steve raised his hands for quiet, recognizing there was more to this story. "Nguyen, sir, can I ask what brought you to our studio today? How did you happen to be here?" Nguyen's answer would make the moment even more extraordinary. "My grandson, he won tickets to Family Feud from radio station. He loves this show, watches every day. He asked me to come with him today because his parents were working. I almost said no because I don't feel well lately. Doctors say my heart is weak. But my grandson really wanted me to come, so I said yes. I had no idea that the one day I come to this show, after 50 years of living in America, the man whose life I saved would be here. This is, I don't know the English word, miracle," Jim responded immediately. "Yes, miracle, that's exactly what this is. Nguyen, I need to tell you something. I need to tell you what your choice to save me meant. Because of you I lived, I came home from Vietnam. I met my wife Helen 6 months after returning. We got married, had a daughter, built a life together. My daughter Rebecca became a teacher, married a good man, and they had a daughter. My granddaughter Emily just graduated from college. None of these people, none of these beautiful lives would exist if you hadn't made the choice to let me live." Gestured to his family, all of whom were crying. "Helen, Rebecca, Marcus, Emily, all of them owe their existence to your mercy. You didn't just save one American pilot. You saved an entire family that hadn't even been born yet. And beyond my family, I'd like to think that the 50 years I spent serving in the Air Force after Vietnam, the young pilots I trained, the missions I flew, the people I helped, all of that happened because you chose compassion over duty." Jim's voice broke completely. "I have been carrying the weight of what you did for me for 52 years. I have felt unworthy of the mercy you showed me, guilty that I continued fighting after you spared me, desperate to find you and say thank you. And now, through some miracle I can't begin to understand, here you are. So let me finally say what I've wanted to say for half a century. Thank you. Thank you for seeing my humanity when you could have seen only an enemy. Thank you for risking your life and your future to spare mine. Thank you for teaching me that even in the middle of war, compassion is possible. Thank you for everything." Jim closed the distance between them and embraced Nguyen, and the two elderly men, former enemies turned brothers through an act of mercy, held each other and wept. The studio audience erupted in the loudest applause and cheers that had ever been heard on the Family Feud stage, a standing ovation that lasted for several minutes as everyone present witnessed this extraordinary reunion. When they finally separated, Nguyen spoke through his tears. "Colonel Patterson, Jim, I need to tell you something too. When I let you go that day, I was very afraid. Afraid I would be caught, afraid I would be punished, afraid I had betrayed my country and my dead brother. For many years, I felt guilt about my choice. I wondered if I was traitor if I had failed my duty. But over the years, I came to understand that showing you mercy was the most important thing I ever did. Not the most heroic by military standards, but the most human, the most right." Nguyen continued, his voice growing stronger. "I am Buddhist. In Buddhism, we believe that saving life creates good karma, creates merit that ripples outward. When you tell me that because I saved you, your wife and daughter and granddaughter exist, that you trained other pilots and helped other people, that tells me that my choice to show mercy created waves of good that spread far beyond what I could see. That gives my choice meaning, makes my suffering afterward worthwhile." He looked at Jim's family, all gathered around now. Mrs. Patterson, I want you to know that I am so happy your husband came home to you. Rebecca, I am honored to meet the daughter who exists because I could not kill her father. Emily, you represent the future, the generations that come from choosing life over death. All of you, you are the proof that mercy matters, that one small choice can change everything. Steve Harvey, attempting to compose himself, made an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we are witnessing something that transcends this show, that transcends entertainment. What we're seeing is the power of mercy, the importance of recognizing our shared humanity even in the midst of conflict, and the way that one person's choice can ripple through decades and generations. He addressed both men directly. Colonel Patterson, Nguyen, what happened here today is nothing short of miraculous. The odds of you two being in the same place at the same time after 52 years, after decades of trying to find each other, are astronomical. But here you are, and I think there's something we need to do to honor this moment and this reunion. Steve turned to address the production team. We're not continuing with the game. The Patterson family automatically wins today's show and the $20,000, but more than that, I want to make sure that Nguyen and his family are taken care of. Nguyen, you mentioned your doctors say your heart is weak. The Steve Harvey Foundation is going to make sure you get the best cardiac care available, all expenses covered. You saved a man's life 52 years ago. The least we can do is make sure you get the medical care you need. The audience erupted again in applause and cheers, but Steve wasn't finished. Additionally, we're going to document your story properly. We're going to make sure that what happened between you two, this incredible act of mercy in the middle of a brutal war, is preserved and shared. Your story needs to be told, needs to be remembered, needs to inspire others. Jim and Nguyen stood together on the stage, and what happened next would become one of the most iconic images in television history. Jim removed his Distinguished Flying Cross Medal from his uniform, one of the highest honors awarded to Air Force pilots, and placed it around Nguyen's neck. This medal was awarded to me for heroism in aerial combat, but the greatest act of heroism I ever witnessed was yours. You deserve this more than I do. Nguyen tried to refuse, overwhelmed, but Jim insisted. Please, let me finally give you something tangible to show my gratitude. You gave me my life. Let me give you this symbol of the life you saved. Nguyen accepted the medal with trembling hands, holding it as though it were the most precious thing he'd ever received. The moment was captured by cameras from every angle, and when the episode aired 3 weeks later, during the week of Veterans Day, the response was extraordinary beyond anything the show had ever experienced. Within 24 hours, the clip of Jim recognizing Nguyen in the audience and their subsequent reunion had been viewed over 1 billion times globally, making it one of the most watched moments in television history. The story resonated on multiple levels. Veterans from all wars saw in Jim and Nguyen's reunion the possibility of healing and reconciliation. Vietnamese Americans, particularly those who had fought on opposite sides of that conflict, found hope in the forgiveness and friendship these two former enemies displayed. Anti-war advocates pointed to the moment as evidence that soldiers on all sides are human beings capable of mercy, and that even the worst conflicts cannot completely extinguish our capacity for compassion. Perhaps most powerfully, the reunion sparked conversations about the Vietnam War that transcended typical political divisions. Rather than arguing about whether the war was justified or necessary, people focused on the individual human stories, the personal choices made in the midst of chaos, and the shared humanity that exists even between enemies. Jim and Nguyen became symbols of reconciliation, their story a testament to the idea that it's never too late to say thank you, to forgive, to recognize that those we once called enemies are simply people like ourselves. In the weeks following the episode, Jim and Nguyen became inseparable. They spent hours together sharing their full stories, filling in details from 52 years of separated lives. Nguyen shared how difficult his life had been after the war, the investigations he faced for suspected collaboration with Americans, his decision to flee Vietnam in 1985, the challenges of building a new life in America. Jim shared his own struggles after Vietnam, the PTSD he dealt with for decades, his guilt about continuing to fight after Nguyen's act of mercy, and his lifelong search for the man who saved him. Steve Harvey dedicated an entire episode of his talk show to their story, bringing both families together for an extended conversation about war, mercy, forgiveness, and reconciliation. During that episode, Helen Patterson shared her perspective. When Jim came home from Vietnam, he was different from the young man who had left. He had nightmares, he struggled with anger and depression, he couldn't talk about what he'd experienced. But one story he told me repeatedly was about the North Vietnamese soldier who let him live. That story haunted him, but it also gave him hope that even in the worst circumstances, people can choose compassion. Rebecca, Jim's daughter, added, "Growing up, I heard about Nguyen constantly. My dad always said, 'You exist because a man I've never met chose mercy over duty.' That shaped my entire understanding of the world. It taught me that our actions ripple outward in ways we can never fully see, that choosing compassion always matters, and that we're all connected in ways we don't realize. When my dad recognized Nguyen in that audience, it felt like destiny, like the universe finally bringing closure to something that needed resolution." Nguyen's family shared their perspectives as well. His daughter spoke about how her father had rarely discussed his wartime experiences, but had occasionally mentioned the American pilot he helped escape. "My father carried guilt about that choice for many years," she explained. "In the Vietnamese community, especially in the years right after the war, there was shame associated with having helped the enemy. My father was sometimes treated with suspicion by other Vietnamese refugees who learned about what he did. But he always said he would make the same choice again, that some things are more important than which side you're fighting for." The episode also featured historians and veterans advocates discussing the broader significance of Jim and Nguyen's story. One historian noted, "What makes this story so powerful is that it humanizes both sides of a conflict that Americans still struggle to process." Nguyen wasn't a faceless enemy. He was a young man who had lost his brother, who saw another young man in pain, and who made an extraordinarily courageous choice to value human life over military duty. Jim wasn't an imperialist aggressor. He was a 20-year-old pilot doing his job who was shown mercy he never expected. Their story reminds us that war is always a tragedy, even when individuals on both sides act with honor and compassion. A veterans advocate added, "Jim and Nguyen's reunion provides a model for reconciliation that we desperately need. So many veterans carry guilt about the wars they fought, the people they killed, the choices they made. So many former enemies live in the same communities now but never speak about their shared history. This reunion shows that it's possible to acknowledge the complexity of war, to honor individual acts of mercy and compassion, and to find healing through connection rather than continued separation." The medical care that Steve Harvey's foundation provided for Nguyen proved to be life-saving. Comprehensive cardiac evaluation revealed that Nguyen needed immediate surgery for severe arterial blockage that would have likely killed him within months without treatment. The surgery was successful, and Nguyen's doctors credited the emotional impact of his reunion with Jim as contributing to his strong recovery. The psychological and emotional boost he received from that reunion, from finally being able to thank Jim and receive Jim's gratitude, gave him a will to live that was crucial to his recovery, his cardiologist explained. During Nguyen's recovery, Jim was at the hospital every day. The two men, who had been strangers connected by a single moment for 52 years, became genuine friends, brothers bonded by shared experience and mutual gratitude. They spoke about their lives, their families, their struggles and triumphs. They laughed together about how fate had brought them back together in such an unlikely way. And they cried together about the war that had shaped both their lives in ways they were still processing decades later. 6 months after their reunion, Jim and Nguyen collaborated on a book titled Mercy in the Jungle, How Two Soldiers Became Brothers Across Enemy Lines. The book detailed both men's experiences in Vietnam, the moment of their encounter, their separate lives over the following decades, and their miraculous reunion. The book became an instant bestseller and was used in schools and universities to teach about the Vietnam War from a personal, human perspective rather than just a political or military one. In the book's epilogue, Jim wrote, "For 52 years, I wondered if Nguyen had survived, if he had made it home, if he had lived a good life. The guilt of not knowing, of not being able to thank him, weighed on me constantly. When I recognized him in that audience, it felt like the universe had finally answered a prayer I'd been praying for half a century. Nguyen's choice to spare me taught me that mercy is possible even in the darkest circumstances, that our common humanity can transcend the worst conflicts, and that one person's choice to do the right thing can change the course of history in ways they'll never fully understand. I am alive because Nguyen chose compassion. My family exists because he valued human life over military duty. Every good thing I've done in my 52 years since that day is possible only because he made that choice. That is his legacy, and I am committed to honoring it for whatever time I have left." Nguyen's epilogue was equally powerful. "When I found that young American pilot in the jungle, I had a choice. Follow my orders and capture him, or follow my heart and help him escape. I chose my heart, even though it could have cost me everything. For many years, I wondered if I had made the right choice, if showing mercy to an enemy made me a traitor or a coward. But seeing Jim now, seeing his beautiful family, learning about the life he lived and the good he did, I know with absolute certainty that I made the right choice. In Buddhism, we say that saving one life is like saving the whole world. Jim's family, his wife, his daughter, his granddaughter, they are my proof that this is true. They exist because I chose life over death. That knowledge gives meaning to all the suffering I endured after the war, all the suspicion and difficulty I faced. It was worth it. He was worth it. Life is always worth choosing. 1 year after their reunion on Family Feud, Jim and Nguyen traveled together back to Vietnam, to the exact location where their lives had intersected 52 years earlier. The trip was documented for a special that aired on multiple networks and was viewed by tens of millions of people. Standing in the jungle where Nguyen had found Jim broken and afraid, where he had made the choice to show mercy, both men wept and embraced and finally found complete peace with their shared history. At that location, they held a ceremony honoring all soldiers on both sides who died in the Vietnam War, acknowledging the tragedy of that conflict while celebrating the capacity for mercy and compassion that exists even in the midst of brutality. Local Vietnamese veterans and American veterans living in Vietnam joined them, creating a powerful moment of reconciliation between former enemies. The trip also allowed Nguyen to introduce Jim to his Vietnamese relatives who still lived in the country, creating connections between American and Vietnamese families that transcended the war. Jim's granddaughter, Emily, who joined them for the trip, formed a particularly close friendship with Nguyen's grandson, the same grandson whose insistence on attending Family Feud had led to the miraculous reunion. The young people, representing a generation with no memory of the war, embodied the possibility of complete healing and friendship unburdened by the past. 3 years after their reunion, Jim and Nguyen continued their friendship and their mission of promoting reconciliation and peace. They spoke at military academies, veterans organizations, schools, and peace conferences about their experience. Their message was consistent, that even in war we must never lose sight of our shared humanity, that mercy is always the right choice, that enemies can become brothers, and that it's never too late for healing and forgiveness. If Jim Patterson's recognition of Nguyen Van Thanh in the audience after 52 years, and their extraordinary reunion, has moved you, inspired you to reconsider how we think about former enemies, or reminded you that individual acts of mercy can ripple through generations, please take a moment now to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share this story with veterans who might need to see that reconciliation is possible, with anyone struggling to forgive someone from their past, and with young people who need to understand that even the worst conflicts cannot completely extinguish human compassion. Jim and Nguyen's story, from Nguyen's courageous choice to spare an enemy's life to their miraculous reunion 52 years later, demonstrates that mercy matters, that our choices echo through time in ways we cannot predict, and that the universe sometimes provides the closure and connection we desperately need exactly when we need it most. Your engagement helps ensure this powerful message of reconciliation and forgiveness reaches more people who need to hear it. The story of Colonel Jim Patterson recognizing Nguyen Van Thanh in the Family Feud audience 52 years after Nguyen saved his life in the jungles of Vietnam stands as one of the most miraculous and moving reunions ever captured on television. Nguyen's choice to spare an enemy pilot, risking his own safety and future to honor the humanity of a young man in pain, created ripples that extended through 5 decades and 3 generations. Jim's lifetime of searching for the man who showed him mercy, carrying gratitude and guilt in equal measure, finally found resolution in the most unlikely of circumstances. Their reunion reminds us that war creates enemies, but that individual humans can transcend those divisions through compassion, that former enemies can become the deepest of friends, and that the universe sometimes orchestrates moments of such perfect timing that we can only call them miracles. Jim and Nguyen's story is a testament to the power of mercy, the possibility of redemption and reconciliation, and the truth that choosing life over death, compassion over duty, and love over hate creates legacies that echo through generations. That is a lesson our divided world desperately needs to remember.